Fear, anxiety, and self-doubt don't disappear when you think positive, talk yourself up, or wait until you feel ready. They disappear when you do one uncomfortable thing before your brain can stop you. That's the truth. And the fastest way I know to prove this to yourself is waking up at 4:30 a.m. on purpose. I'm not saying this to sound extreme. I'm saying it because I've seen fear up close in places where mistakes cost lives. And I learned something most people never do. Fear is not an emotion you defeat with logic. It's a biological response you override with action. That's the weird trick, not motivation, not affirmations, action before thought. Here's the problem most people don't realize they have. Fear talks to you first thing in the morning, not when you're weak, when you're comfortable. Around 6 a.m., when the alarm goes off and you still have time to negotiate. That's when anxiety makes its move. You didn't sleep enough. Today's not important. You can start later. You deserve rest. And every time you listen, your brain learns a dangerous lesson. Hesitation keeps you safe. Military psychologists discovered something uncomfortable but powerful. The brain is wired to avoid discomfort, not danger. It can't tell the difference between real threats and imagined ones. According to behavioral research, the moment you pause to evaluate discomfort, the brain labels it as risk. And once something is labeled risky, anxiety takes over automatically. That's why overthinking feels so paralyzing. You're not broken. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Here's where 4:30 a.m. changes everything. At that hour, your brain is not fully online. The emotional bargaining system hasn't booted up yet. You don't wake up confident. You wake up resistant. And resistance is the doorway. When you get up anyway, before your mind can argue, you break the loop. Your body moves, your brain follows. Fear loses its leverage. Researchers studying stress and performance found that short, voluntary exposure to discomfort trains the nervous system to remain calm under pressure later. This is why elite military units don't train comfort, they train control. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, the goal is to prove who's in charge. And every morning you choose discomfort first. You collect evidence that fear doesn't get to decide your actions. Most people think confidence comes from success. That's backwards. According to cognitive psychology, confidence is built from completed actions, not outcomes. You don't need a win, you need a rep. One early uncomfortable rep that tells your brain, I move even when it's hard. That single signal lowers anxiety more effectively than hours of positive thinking. Here's the mistake almost everyone makes. They hear something like this and turn it into a productivity hack. They wake up early, grab their phone, scroll, drink coffee, and stay comfortable. And nothing changes. Fear stays intact because comfort stayed intact. The trick only works if the discomfort comes first, before dopamine, before distraction, before excuses. And let me be clear about something. This isn't about being disciplined all day. It's about winning the first decision. Researchers call this identity priming. The first action of the day sets the tone for how the brain interprets stress afterward. When the day starts with avoidance, anxiety grows. When the day starts with voluntary discomfort, fear shrinks. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm telling you why it works. Fear survives on delay. Anxiety feeds on negotiation. Self-doubt grows in the space between intention and action. Waking up at 4:30 a.m. collapses that space. It forces action before fear can speak. And once you understand why your brain fights this so hard, you'll realize something uncomfortable but freeing. Fear isn't powerful, it's just early. If you've ever wondered why fear feels so convincing, so logical, and so personal, here's the truth. Your brain is not designed to make you confident, it's designed to keep you alive. And in the modern world, that wiring is quietly working against you every single day. Your brain runs on a survival system that hasn't been updated in thousands of years. It evolved to spot threats, conserve energy, and avoid unnecessary risk. That system worked perfectly when danger was physical. Predators, starvation, exposure. But today, the threats you face are psychological, judgment, failure, discomfort, and your brain treats those exactly the same as life or death danger. Neuroscience researchers have shown that the brain does not distinguish between physical threat and emotional discomfort. To your nervous system, standing up to fear, starting something uncertain, or pushing into resistance feels just as risky as stepping into harm. That's why your heart rate spikes. That's why your chest tightens. That's why your mind floods with reasons to stop. It's not intuition, it's an outdated alarm system. Here's where anxiety gets dangerous. Anxiety isn't fear itself. Anxiety is the anticipation of fear. According to behavioral scientists, the brain amplifies perceived threats when action is delayed. The longer you hesitate, the more evidence your brain gathers that something must be wrong. So it increases the volume, more doubt, more worry, more catastrophic thinking, not to hurt you, but to protect you. This is why waiting to feel ready is one of the most destructive habits you can develop. Readiness is not a feeling your brain gives easily. In fact, studies on motivation show that motivation usually follows action, not the other way around. When people wait for motivation first, they often wait forever. The brain interprets waiting as confirmation that the task is dangerous. I saw this constantly in training. Strong, capable candidates would freeze not because they lacked physical ability, but because they trusted the voice in their head too much. That voice sounded intelligent, rational, persuasive, but it was lying, not maliciously, automatically. Its job was to keep them comfortable, not capable. Modern comfort makes this worse. Climate control, instant entertainment, endless dopamine on demand. According to researchers studying stress tolerance, constant comfort lowers your threshold for discomfort. The less discomfort you experience, the more threatening even small challenges feel. That's why people feel overwhelmed by things that would have been considered trivial a generation ago. It's not weakness, it's conditioning. Here's the mistake people make when they learn this. They try to think their way out of fear. They read books, watch videos, analyze their emotions, but cognition is slower than instinct. By the time you finish thinking, the survival system has already decided. Fear wins by speed. Psychologists call this the threat first bias. The brain reacts before the conscious mind can intervene. That's why affirmations fail under pressure. That's why logic collapses in moments of anxiety. And that's why the solution is not more thinking, it's earlier action. When you act before your brain fully engages, you bypass the alarm. This is why controlled voluntary stress works. Researchers studying exposure therapy discovered that gradual, intentional exposure to discomfort retrains the nervous system. The brain learns a new association. Discomfort does not equal danger. And once that association changes, fear loses its grip. This is also why people who routinely do hard things appear calm under pressure. It's not personality, it's training. Their nervous system has evidence that they survive discomfort repeatedly. That evidence is more powerful than any belief. But most people never collect that evidence. They avoid, they delay, they negotiate, and every time they do, fear grows stronger. According to stress research, avoidance is the single fastest way to increase long-term anxiety. It teaches the brain that fear is justified. The way out is not dramatic, it's methodical, small, controlled acts of discomfort that you choose, not ones forced on you. That's why waking up early works. That's why cold exposure works. That's why movement before thought works. You are teaching your brain a new rule. I act even when it's uncomfortable. Once that rule is established, fear changes its tone. It stops screaming, it starts whispering, and eventually it becomes information instead of a command. In the next part, I'm going to explain exactly why 4:30 a.m. is such a powerful time to do this, why early discomfort carries more psychological weight than any other habit, and how it quietly reprograms your confidence before the day even begins. There's nothing magical about 4:30 a.m. The power isn't the time on the clock. The power is what that time removes. It removes negotiation. It removes audience. It removes the long internal debate that fear needs in order to survive. By the time most people wake up, their brain is already fully online. Cortisol is up, thoughts are racing, the mind is active enough to start building arguments. At 6 a.m., fear has a microphone. At 4:30, it barely has a whisper. That difference matters more than people realize. Researchers who study decision fatigue have found that the brain's self-control and rational capacity are lowest immediately after waking, while the emotional resistance system hasn't fully activated yet. In simple terms, you're less capable of arguing with yourself, and that's an advantage, not a weakness. When you remove the ability to debate, you force action. This is why elite units schedule hard tasks early, not because it's efficient, but because it's effective. Action taken in a low negotiation state imprints more deeply on identity. According to behavioral psychologists, behaviors performed when resistance is high but reasoning is low are remembered by the brain as proof of authority over self. You didn't think your way through it, you acted anyway. Here's the dangerous misunderstanding. People hear wake up early and assume the habit itself is the solution. It's not. Waking up early without discomfort does nothing. If you wake up at 4:30 and immediately recreate comfort, fear remains untouched. The brain only rewires when it encounters controlled stress. Studies on stress inoculation show that short, voluntary discomfort has a disproportionately large effect on resilience compared to long, forced stress. This is why SEAL training uses brief, repeated exposures instead of constant suffering. The goal is not exhaustion, It's adaptation. Your nervous system learns that stress is survivable and temporary. At 4:30 a.m., even small acts feel bigger. Getting out of bed feels harder, movement feels heavier, stillness feels louder. That amplifies the signal sent to the brain. When you win early, the win carries weight. You're not just completing a task, you're rewriting your relationship with resistance. Here's where fear pushes back. It tells you this is extreme, unnecessary, unhealthy. That's fear protecting its territory. According to psychologists studying avoidance behavior, the mind will frame any threat to comfort as irrational. It doesn't argue with facts, it argues with emotion, and emotion always sounds convincing. The other mistake people make is overdoing it. They turn 4:30 a.m. into a punishment. Too much intensity, too many rules, that backfires. The nervous system doesn't learn dominance, it learns dread. Researchers found that when discomfort becomes overwhelming, the brain associates the habit with threat instead of control. The sweet spot is discomfort you choose, not discomfort that crushes you. Enough to trigger resistance, not enough to trigger panic. That's why the early morning works so well. The environment itself provides friction, darkness, silence, cold. You don't need to add chaos. You need to move through resistance calmly. There's also something psychological happening that most people miss. At 4:30 a.m., no one is watching. No validation, no comparison. According to social psychology research, behavior performed without an audience strengthens internal motivation. You're not doing it for praise. You're doing it because you said you would. That builds self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Early mornings accelerate this process because the promise feels costly. The higher the cost, the stronger the trust signal. But here's the warning. If you wake up early and immediately reach for stimulation, you erase the benefit. Dopamine before discomfort teaches the brain that relief comes first. And when relief comes first, fear stays in control. According to habit researchers, the first 5 minutes after waking set the emotional tone for the next several hours. This is where most people fail without realizing it. They change the time, but not the sequence. They wake up early and still let fear choose comfort first. The trick only works when discomfort leads and reward follows. In the next part, I'm going to break down why most people who try waking up early still feel anxious, what they're doing in the first moments that destroys the effect, and how a simple shift turns early mornings into a psychological weapon instead of just lost sleep. Most people who try waking up early quit for the same reason. They say it didn't work. They got up at 4:30, felt miserable, dragged through the day, and their fear was still there. Anxiety still showed up. Self-doubt still whispered. So they assume the whole idea is overrated. What they don't realize is that they changed the time, but they didn't change the order. And order is everything. Fear doesn't care what time you wake up. Fear cares who gets control first. The moment your eyes open, your nervous system is looking for a signal. Not motivation, not inspiration, a signal that answers one question. Who is in charge today, you or comfort? According to habit researchers, the first behavior after waking has an outsized impact on how the brain interprets stress for the next several hours. That first action becomes a reference point. Everything that follows is filtered through it. If the first thing you do is reach for relief, your brain learns that discomfort must be escaped. If the first thing you do is move into resistance calmly, your brain learns that discomfort is manageable. This is where most people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They wake up early and immediately grab their phone. News, messages, social media, dopamine before discipline. The brain floods with stimulation and the nervous system stays reactive. Researchers studying anxiety patterns found that early dopamine spikes increase baseline anxiety later in the day. You feel alert, but not grounded, busy, but not calm. Others wake up and rush straight into coffee. That seems harmless, but it sends the same message. I need something external to function. According to stress response studies, reliance on stimulants before grounding increases emotional volatility under pressure. You borrow energy instead of generating control. Some people wake up early and start planning, thinking, organizing. They tell themselves they are being productive, but thinking is where fear lives. Overanalysis, mental rehearsals, running through worst case scenarios. You wake up early just to give fear more space. In every case, the mistake is the same. Comfort, stimulation, or thinking comes before controlled discomfort. And when that happens, fear keeps its authority. In SEAL training, we learned this the hard way. It wasn't the hardest evolutions that broke people. It was the small habits done in the wrong order Comfort before control, relief before responsibility. Once that pattern sets in, fear doesn't need to shout. It knows you'll hand over control voluntarily. Researchers call this learned dependency. The brain associates regulation with external input instead of internal action. When stress shows up later, the nervous system looks for escape instead of composure. Anxiety spikes because the brain has no evidence that you can handle discomfort without relief. The irony is that people think they are protecting themselves. They say, I need to ease into the day. I need to feel ready first. But readiness is a myth created by comfort. The brain never feels ready for discomfort. It only feels capable after it survives it. Another common mistake is intensity. People wake up early and punish themselves. Too much cold, too much effort, too much pressure. They associate the morning with dread instead of authority. According to nervous system research, when discomfort crosses into overwhelm, the brain records threat, not mastery. Fear gets reinforced, not reduced. The goal is not suffering. The goal is dominance with calm. Choosing discomfort deliberately without chaos, without panic. That distinction matters. There is also a psychological trap people fall into. They expect immediate emotional relief. They wake up early and wait to feel confident. When they don't, they assume it failed. But fear doesn't disappear instantly. It loses credibility gradually. Confidence is not a feeling, it's a pattern of evidence. Behavioral scientists have shown that the brain updates its threat assessment only after repeated proof. One early morning helps, several change identity. Fear weakens when it realizes its warnings are being ignored and nothing bad happens. This is why the first few minutes matter more than the rest of the day. You are teaching your nervous system how to respond to resistance, either with escape or with presence. In the next part, I'm going to walk you through the exact short ritual that flips this switch. It takes less than 2 minutes, no motivation required, and it works because it speaks the only language fear understands: action without negotiation. What finally breaks fear isn't intensity, it's precision, a short, controlled act that sends a clear message to your nervous system without overwhelming it. In training, we learned that the body listens before the mind does. And once the body accepts stress calmly, the mind has no choice but to follow. This is where the ritual matters, not because it's complicated, but because it's specific. Fear doesn't respond to big promises or dramatic gestures, it responds to patterns. And the pattern you build in the first moments of the day quietly decides how much authority fear has over you later. The ritual starts with one rule: no stimulation, no phone, no music, no caffeine. According to researchers studying nervous system regulation, external stimulation immediately after waking increases emotional reactivity. You want the opposite. You want to stay inside your body, not get pulled into your head. The moment you stand up, you introduce controlled discomfort. It can be cold water on your face, a cold shower, slow push-ups, a deliberate walk into the cold air. It doesn't matter what you choose. What matters is that it creates resistance without chaos. The discomfort should be noticeable but manageable. Stress researchers have found that brief cold exposure activates the vagus nerve and improves stress tolerance when paired with controlled breathing. This isn't about toughness, it's about regulation. You're teaching your nervous system that stress doesn't require panic. Then comes stillness. This is the part most people skip, and it's why they don't get the full effect. After the discomfort, you don't distract. You don't rush. You stand or sit in silence and breathe slowly, in through the nose, out longer than in. According to autonomic nervous system research, extending the exhale signals safety and control to the brain. This combination is deliberate: discomfort followed by calm, stress followed by regulation. The brain learns a powerful sequence. Stress does not equal loss of control. That lesson is what fear has been lying about your entire life. This ritual takes less than 90 seconds. That's important. Studies on habit adherence show that short rituals performed daily are more effective than long routines done inconsistently. Fear doesn't need a marathon to weaken. It needs repetition. Here's what happens next, and this is where people get it wrong. They expect to feel fearless. That doesn't happen. Fear still shows up, but it shows up differently: quieter, less convincing, more like background noise than a command. According to exposure therapy research, fear loses its power when the brain repeatedly experiences stress without negative outcome. Each repetition lowers the threat prediction. Each morning you complete this ritual, you deposit proof. Not that you are brave, that you are capable. This is why the ritual works later in the day. When pressure hits, when anxiety rises, when doubt creeps in, your nervous system remembers the morning. It remembers that you already faced resistance and survived. The response changes. Breathing stays slower. Muscles stay looser. Thoughts don't spiral as fast. There's a reason elite operators appear calm under pressure. It's not personality, it's training. Their nervous systems have been taught thousands of times that stress is manageable. You are doing the same thing, just scaled for real life. The biggest mistake people make at this stage is inconsistency. They treat the ritual like a tool instead of a rule. They do it when they feel like it. Fear notices that immediately. According to behavioral psychology, inconsistency weakens habit authority. The brain stops trusting the pattern. Fear regains ground. Another mistake is stacking too much onto it. More time, more pain, more goals. That turns the ritual into a burden. And when it feels like a burden, avoidance creeps back in. Simplicity keeps fear cornered. Complexity gives it escape routes. There's also a subtle shift that happens after a few weeks that no one warns you about. Your tolerance for excuses drops. You start seeing hesitation more clearly. The lies sound familiar, not convincing. That can feel uncomfortable because it removes your ability to hide from yourself. But that's growth. That's authority returning. Researchers studying identity change found that repeated small actions shape self-perception more powerfully than beliefs. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who struggles with fear. You start seeing yourself as someone who acts anyway. That identity shift is what sustains confidence long term. In the next part, I'm going to explain why this one habit quietly changes everything else, why it's rare despite being simple, and how it reshapes your decisions even on days when nothing goes according to plan. What this habit really changes has nothing to do with mornings. It changes how you see yourself under pressure. And that's why it works when everything else fails. Most people think fear disappears when life becomes stable, when problems are solved, when confidence arrives. That never happens. Life stays unpredictable. Pressure doesn't go away. What changes is your position relative to it. You stop being underneath fear and start standing over it. Researchers who study identity-based behavior discovered something critical. Long-term change does not come from willpower or motivation. It comes from evidence. The brain updates identity only after repeated proof, and the most powerful proof is action taken when it would have been easier not to act. Every time you wake up early and choose discomfort first, you send a message that cuts deeper than words. You're not saying, I hope I can handle today. You are saying, I already handled something hard before the day even started. That changes how stress lands later. When something goes wrong, your nervous system does not immediately escalate. It recognizes the sensation, tight chest, fast breathing, mental noise, but it no longer treats those signals as danger. According to stress resilience research, familiarity reduces threat response. You have felt resistance before. You have stayed calm inside it before, so fear loses its urgency. This is why the habit feels subtle at first and profound later. The first few weeks feel mechanical, quiet, almost boring. Then one day something stressful happens and you notice something strange. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of spiral. That's not luck, that's training showing up. There is also a reason this habit is rare, even though it is simple. It offers no immediate validation, no applause, no visible reward. According to behavioral economists, humans are wired to avoid behaviors with delayed payoff. Fear thrives in that gap. It convinces you that what you are doing is pointless because the benefit is not instant, but delayed payoff habits are the ones that change trajectory. Elite performers understand this. Military units understand this. Researchers studying high performers found that they prioritize habits that build internal authority, not external results. The result comes later. Authority comes first. Another reason people quit is that this habit removes their excuses. Once you prove to yourself that you can act without feeling ready, fear loses its best weapon. The story that says, I just need more time, more clarity, more confidence, that story stops working. And that can feel uncomfortable. Growth often does. But here's the truth most people never face. Fear doesn't actually want to stop you. It wants to lead you. It wants to decide when you move, when you rest, when you speak, when you avoid. This habit quietly takes that leadership away. According to cognitive behavioral research, the sense of control over one's actions is one of the strongest predictors of reduced anxiety. Not control over outcomes, control over behavior. When you know you will act regardless of how you feel, fear loses leverage. That's why this one habit spills into everything else. Conversations you used to avoid, decisions you used to delay, boundaries you used to soften. You stop waiting for the right emotional weather. You move anyway. And no, this doesn't make you reckless. It makes you grounded. Fear becomes information, not instruction. Anxiety becomes a signal, not a stop sign. Self-doubt becomes noise, not truth. The final mistake people make is thinking this habit works only on good days. It works best on bad ones. The days you sleep poorly, the days you feel unmotivated, those days carry the strongest signal. According to identity research, actions taken under resistance reshape self-concept more than actions taken when things feel easy. You don't need to wake up at 4:30 forever, but you do need a daily moment where you choose discomfort before comfort. Early mornings just make that choice harder to avoid and harder to negotiate with. Fear will still show up. It always does. The difference is that it will no longer sound like the truth. It will sound like what it always was: early, loud, and wrong. You don't overcome fear by eliminating it. You overcome it by moving first.